So this microphone, it has like a magnet on the back, so I can stick it on my shirt with the magnet on the other side just to hold it in place. And the texture of the magnet, it's like really cold and it like pulls my shirt down, and it's just really uncomfortable and overstimulating. So I'm trying something new, and I put the microphone on the chain that I was wearing. So this is just a test. We'll see how it works. Hopefully there's not like sound of it like clanking around. Anyway, with that said, the topic of today's video is the truth behind high functioning autism. And I put high functioning in quotes because it's a phrase that isn't really used anymore, and we'll go into why it's not. The main reason is it just doesn't tell the full picture. I'm diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder level 1. The levels of the ASD diagnosis are this: level 1 requiring support, level 2 requiring more support, and level 3 requiring substantial support. And so in comparison to other autistic people on the spectrum, I require less support. But with that said, it doesn't mean no support. And if we're talking about in comparison to non-autistic people, yes, I still require a lot of support and require a lot of accommodations that just most everyday people wouldn't need or wouldn't really need in order to like function and get by in daily life. I really do feel like autism in general, everyone on the autism spectrum is misunderstood. This includes those who might be deemed as high functioning, or those who might have higher support needs than myself. I think just autism in general is misunderstood, and there's so much work that needs to be done when it comes to just like understanding autism, when it comes to education on autism, and also with that said, me being a lower support needs autistic person, I feel like my experience is also really misunderstood. And so in this video, I want to kind of go into why I feel that way, and like what the truth is about that. And I just want to like be very intentional with this. This video isn't meant to speak over anyone else in the autism community. Everything that I share in this video is based on my own personal experience, and autism is a spectrum, and every single person on the autism spectrum is different and unique in their own way. And every single person deserves to be understood. And so this is simply me sharing my own experience. It's not an attempt to invalidate or disregard anyone else's autistic experience, especially those who have higher support needs than myself. So with that said, I want to kind of get started on talking about like what high functioning really means. So I am seemingly high functioning, right? From the outside, I'm able to speak, I'm able to communicate, I'm able to articulate my thoughts. With that said, I still have some deficits in communication. They might not really come across on camera because right now I'm in the safe space of my home. There's not any dialogue that's happening. There's not a back and forth. There aren't other humans around. It's just me and my dog right now, and I get to stare outside and look at the clouds and look at all the beautiful trees. And so, yeah, I am in my comfort space right now. And so you might not be able to necessarily see those things. But for the most part, yes, I can communicate clearly and I can articulate my thoughts clearly. And I'm also able to live a mostly independent life. And so, yes, I would understand why people would be like, oh yeah, he's definitely high functioning. He doesn't look like he really struggles that much. Just some things that I've heard people say. And here's the thing. A lot of my autism isn't necessarily like visible from the outside, especially to people who don't know me. I think if you get to know me, you would start to understand more about that. But this is true for a lot of people. A lot of our autistic experience is very internal and isn't really visible to someone who might not know what to look for or who might not know that person very well. And so when we talk about like functioning labels, it's not really like a clinical term, and it's kind of a phrase that we're trying to get away from, just because it doesn't really tell the full picture. And if you see me looking over here, I made some bullet points on my laptop that I just want to make sure that I hit, so I don't get like too sidetracked in this video. The functioning labels are social labels, and it's often based on how someone appears to be externally. So like the things that I said, speaking, I'm able to speak, I'm able to live independently, and I'm able to make money and provide for myself. But what it doesn't really reflect are the day-to-day struggles. It doesn't reflect the amount of energy, effort, emotional toll that some of the challenges that come along with being autistic takes on me. And it does feel a bit invalidating, because when I do try to speak up about a more challenging aspect of my autistic experience, or maybe if I am trying to ask for an accommodation that is not just a preference but a necessity, or maybe if I am trying to seek more support in a certain area of my life, people are very quick to assume and quick to judge that, no, you're fine, or this is just an excuse, or you seem to be doing okay, just push through it a little more. And it can actually lead to like less support than we actually need. It can lead to almost like this pressure that because I appear to be high functioning, or I'm even going to say normal in quotes here. It's a comment I've received on a few of my videos, like, oh, you seem normal, you're fine, and I put it in quotes for the obvious reason that, like, what even is normal? Nothing's normal. But I think by societal standards, it's what people are talking about. There's this pressure that like because I might not be as much like, or because my struggles might not be as visible on the external, that that my internal struggles aren't real and that they don't matter, and that I should just like try to push through without any support, without any accommodations. And this can definitely lead to very significant mental health challenges. It can lead to burnout. It can lead to just like kind of like struggling with our identity and our place in the world, because it's like we don't fit into this category of neurotypical, or we also like don't fit into this category of like being autistic and like actually needing those supports, because people don't recognize that in us. And so it just makes it hard in its own unique way. And this is by no means me like complaining or saying like I have it worse than other people. I'm simply sharing my experience and the reality of my experience. And I can't bypass this reality because it is so prominent and so prevalent in my everyday life that even if I try to ignore it, I can try to suppress it a little bit, but then it just comes right back up tenfold. And so this is not complaining. This is not like me having this victim mindset. This is literally just acknowledging my reality as an autistic person. And so let's kind of go into like the fact that I have an autism diagnosis, or the fact that anyone would have an autism diagnosis, means that there's the symptoms or traits or whatever you want to call it that make them autistic in accordance to the diagnostic criteria. For this example, we're using the DSM-5. These things have to be disabling in some way. And literally in the diagnostic criteria, which I'll read it verbatim, section D says, symptoms cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of current functioning. So in order to be autistic, if that makes sense, like these things have to be disabling. And so even if I might require less support than someone else on the autism spectrum, I still require support. I still struggle. These things still cause significant impairment in pretty much all aspects of my life. And this kind of leads me to the next thing, which I did touch on, which is like a lot of these struggles that I have that I now realize are autism related are internal, and they're not really understood by other people. And they're not always seen by those certain like stereotypical autistic behaviors. Like a lot of times when I get really overstimulated, I think I've kind of learned to like internalize that, and instead of like experiencing a meltdown, which I think I'd had more meltdowns than shutdowns when I was a kid, for sure. But now that I'm an adult, a lot of these meltdowns are more internalized, and they're what would be called a shutdown now, where like I can't speak, I get frozen, but I'm not like you wouldn't know what's going on just by looking from the outside in. And that's just one example. What a lot of people don't see also is like the amount of like analyzing and like thinking and calculations and curiosity and rumination and perseveration that my brain does. You also wouldn't be able to see that from the outside looking in. And then when it comes to like social settings, it's kind of hard because like there have been times where people have thought that I was like stuck up, or I thought that I was better than them, or like, oh, like they thought I was rude, or like when like none of that was my intention. And it's because like that's the way I get interpreted a lot when it comes to like social communication. And that's also because of my autism. It might be because I have like a delayed processing, especially in conversations where it takes me a little bit to like make sense and understand what someone is saying and then like formulate a response to that. Or I might be more quiet in a social setting. And I've learned that people think that could mean that I'm like judging them or that I'm not interested, when neither of those things are true. And so, like, all I'm trying to say here is that a lot of these things that are caused by my autism are often perceived as other things by non-autistic people. And this is really, really hard. And I know I've made videos about this before, of just like the being misunderstood aspect of being autistic, which is so prevalent in my life, always has been. And it's almost like people they don't understand that they're just like too quick to judge. Like they don't understand. And so a lot of the struggles that I have due to my autism are often perceived as other things, as having a poor intention behind it, or as having just like something else causing it. And what people don't understand is like, no, this is because of my autism. And it might not look like what you thought autism would look like, but this is also autism. And this kind of leads me to the next thing, which is masking. This is a big part of why I might appear to be like more high functioning on the outside. And the thing with masking is I see it as it's both a privilege and sort of like a detriment. I say that because like I can recognize that there are times where I might feel a little bit unsafe in a situation, and then because I am able to mask or maybe like pass as neurotypical for a short amount of time, that I would be able to get by in that situation where there are other autistic people who can't mask and they wouldn't be able to get by in that situation. And so I recognize that to be a privilege. But when we're masking, it takes like an extreme amount of energy and effort, and I don't think most people understand that. And the difference between like an autistic person masking versus a neurotypical person masking is, and when a neurotypical person masks, there's usually just like a few subtle changes that they make to like try to fit in or to try to get something out of the situation. When I mask, it's like I have to be a completely different person and pretend I have a completely different brain. And so like I have like 100 times the change, or there's like 100 times the change I have to make versus a neurotypical person who would have to make like 3 times the change. And so it leads to so many other health issues and mental health issues. And like I said, masking is so incredibly exhausting. Like, if I do have to mask, like, and even an example is like, I had to go to the car dealership a few weeks ago to get my headlight changed on my car. And even in that situation, like I had to mask a little bit. Like my natural self, like if it were up to me, I would like, first of all, I wouldn't I wouldn't have gone to that. So I think having to go there is like part of the masking, and then um, having to speak to them, I would also say that's part of the masking, because if it were my choice, like I could just have it like written down on a note, be like, this is what's wrong, here's the note. But like I had to explain what was going on, and then like I was like really tired after that experience, and I realized it's because I kind of had to put on this front, and I had to talk to these people, and I had to do something new, all of which required me to mask my autism a little bit, to disregard my sensory issues, to disregard my discomfort in that situation. And so like the day after it, like I woke up in the morning and my executive functioning was really low. I couldn't really do much, and I was even more overstimulated that day. So all I'm trying to say is I can put on this like facade for a short time, but the consequences often make it like not worth it at all, because I will be down for a few days afterwards. And by down, I mean like literally I'll need to stay home. I might need to order food out because I wouldn't be able to cook for myself. Can't even like organize my thoughts to figure out like what I even would need to do to make myself a meal. I would be like really low energy, very low motivation. And that's just a pattern that I've noticed time and time again when I am in a setting where I do mask, and I've definitely been working on like masking less and less, but it kind of goes back to that thing of like there are some scenarios where it might actually be necessary to mask, and that's just part of my experience and part of my reality, and part of that is also acceptance. And with the masking too, it leads to a lot of mental health issues. It can lead to a lot of like identity issues, a lot of shame, a lot of struggles with like self-esteem and self-love, which I've definitely experienced that in my life as well. For me, I have found ways to support my independence and to build a lifestyle that works for me. I I have almost done this in a very like methodical way, and even before I was diagnosed as autistic, I knew that I had an idea of what I needed my lifestyle to look like. So it's like I was already finding ways to support my brain before I even knew like what I was really doing. I can think like back in high school where I knew I needed to be self-employed because just like having a job sounded absolutely miserable. And so I have built and structured my life at this point in my life in a way that like really supports my independence. And I feel like if I were in any other environment or any other scenario that wasn't the scenario that I'm currently in, I would definitely have a lot more challenges, and I'd have a lot more struggles, and I would have even more support needs. But because I've found ways to create create this structure in my life, I feel like I need less of that. For example, so I'm self-employed, and I have built my life in a way that like takes into account my energy levels, takes into account just like my autism in general. Our home is very sensory friendly. We don't use the bright overhead lights in here. We try to keep things very organized because clutter really overstimulates me. And then like with work, I've built a schedule that works for me, that works with my like creative flow. I have been able to create the freedom to if there is a day where I'm unable to do much and my executive functioning is low, I can take the day off if I need it. I've found tools that support myself, like exercise, like going into nature. And I'm sure there's definitely a lot more that I've been able to create in my life. But those are just like some examples of how I've been able to like build this independence for myself. But like I said, if I were to be like picked up, and I imagine like one of those like claw machines comes and picks me up and it places me in probably any other environment, any other home situation, any other work situation, things would be a lot different. And it's only been recently within the past year where I feel like I've been able to like find this peace in my life as an autistic person, because I can imagine when I was working a job, for example, like when I was working as a personal trainer, I feel like I was a completely different person because I was in a very unsupportive environment. And by that, I mean like unsupportive of my autism and my neurodiversity. There were like barely any accommodations. I didn't even know what accommodations were at the time. And I was also like extremely, extremely anxious at that time. I was also struggling with like not wanting to be alive at that time. I was incredibly overstimulated all the time, very irritable. And it's kind of crazy, like looking back at like the difference of myself then versus now, and how much a role the environment plays, how much of a role what I do for work plays into it. And so, yeah, I feel like because I've been able to support, or because I've been able to find ways to support myself and to like take a lot of time to methodically build up my life in this way, it has definitely helped me, and it's allowed me to kind of like thrive a little bit more than just like trying to keep my head above water and just trying to like grasp for air. And so because of all of these things, like I mentioned, like masking and my environment that I'm in and the life that I live, and because I do have various supports in place, and those also include like mental health supports, like going to therapy, because I understand what accommodations I need. Even things as simple as like I'm using this fidget tool while I'm recording this video. It helps me regulate and stay focused while I'm on camera. Just like little tiny things that I've done and ways that I found to support myself. I feel like that also helps me be in a more regulated state. And so the external experience of my autism isn't really visible as much, because there are fewer like quote unquote like behaviors that would be observed as being like autistic behaviors, because I am more regulated and I am more comfortable in my environment. I'm less overstimulated, and I have these supports in place to help me. But if these were all taken away from me, I feel like the external observation of myself would be vastly different than what it is right now. And so it's been a lot of work to get to this place, both work that I've done myself and work that other people have done to help me. And so that's just like another thing as to like why I probably appear more high functioning. And I can recognize the blessing, and like I feel every day when I do my morning meditation, I feel so extremely grateful for where I am in my life right now, because I feel like I'm finally in a place where I feel like I have the support that I need, when for all of my life I didn't have this support. And I can see how helpful it is to have this support and to have this understanding of my brain, and just like the difference, the vast difference that it really makes. It's huge. And unfortunately, there are so many people on the autism spectrum who don't have this kind of support, who are unable to have this sort of lifestyle, who may not even know like how to create a lifestyle that supports them. And I can completely empathize and understand like why they would have a much more challenging time than myself. And I don't want to invalidate anyone's experience, because I can absolutely understand that. Just a few more notes that I have on here. Let's see. So, yes, like I do appear to be, in quotes, more normal. But while this might be a positive when it comes to like at first being accepted, which it's kind of weird because like I'm being accepted as someone that I'm actually not. And when I say like being accepted, like I feel like a lot of people have an easier time accepting people who appear to be more normal, as opposed to people who might appear to be a little bit more different than themselves. And that's a whole nother conversation as to like why that's wrong in the first place. But I'm just saying, like, in society, I do appear to be a little bit more normal, but then it also creates this unrealistic expectation of myself that like I need to give more and be more when I can't do those things and I can't be those things. And for example, because like I would appear like more normal, and the example I shared of like being in a social setting where I appear more normal, but then in a social setting I would be more quiet, more of a delayed processing. I might say some things that might not really like make sense to someone, and then like they would be quick to judge me for that. And it's like these expectations that people have of me are expectations that I simply can't meet. And this is true for like personal expectations of like how I need to express myself and how I need to be, but also like the societal and capitalistic expectations of how I need to be. And I think all autistic people can relate to this. Like we can't live up to those expectations, unfortunately, no matter how hard we try. There are some things that I can't do no matter how hard I try to do them. And even like if I do get myself to do it, the consequences afterwards, and by consequences I mean like fatigue, exhaustion, overstimulation, are pretty much unbearable. And so it is hard when people expect more out of me because they don't understand what's actually going on inside of me. That's another thing that can lead to like a lot of shame. And I've done a lot of work on shame and guilt in therapy. But just like thinking back in my life, like being a what they call like twice exceptional person growing up, like there was so much that was expected of me, but then there were also things that like, oh, you can do this so well, but then like why can't you do this thing? And it just makes it hard. We talked about masking, and then so let's just kind of touch on going back to like the high functioning label. This is why I think that it is important to look at like support needs and support levels, because the functioning labels, they don't tell the full story, and they create these like unrealistic expectations on both sides. Like high functioning for myself, it's this stereotype that, and this expectation that I feel like I can't live up to most of the time. And then on the opposite end, like a low functioning person, like first of all, that's like almost like an inhumane way to describe a person is low functioning. Like by what standards? By standards that are arbitrary, that were created by a system that doesn't support pretty much anyone. Okay. But those standards aren't real, right? And it implies that like maybe a high functioning person might be better than a low functioning person. Can you see where I'm going with this? Like it doesn't tell the full picture, and it actually creates more harmful stereotypes in doing so. And then that's why the support label or the support levels are better descriptions. But then like I think some people still get it wrong. Like, and I even say like low support needs, but that's actually not what it is. I'm diagnosed with ASD level 1, which means requiring support. It doesn't mean I have low support needs. It means it means I require support. But like when we're looking at like level 2, it means requiring more support, and level 3 means requiring substantial support. So maybe when people say low support needs, they mean like in relative terms to other autistic people, but like it gets confusing because a lot of people take that as a low support needs means no support needs, and that also means not autistic. That means just fine. That means making all this up. These are all things that I've heard, not just about myself, but that I've seen online about other people. And so let's talk about this now. The truth is that I have less support needs than some other people on the autism spectrum. That's just a fact, right? And if I were to deny that fact, it would be, first of all, it wouldn't be truthful. And second of all, it would be just like very misguided. And we have to acknowledge that autism is a spectrum, and having less support needs doesn't mean less autistic, and having more support needs doesn't mean more autistic. If you meet the diagnostic criteria for autism and you're diagnosed with autism, you are autistic. You're not a little bit autistic. You're not extremely autistic. You're either autistic or you're not, okay? And the support needs, the support levels, it doesn't mean how autistic you are. It just means how much support you need in life, right? And I completely acknowledge that I will never know what it's like to need 24/7 care and 24/7 support. And I believe that there is enough room for all of us to coexist on the autism spectrum, because we all struggle, we all have challenges. And we can look at like what the differences in those challenges are, and what those struggles are, and what the differences in the kind of support that we need is. And I think that that's all really important. But when we start comparing, like, I guess kind of like who has it worse, or because I might have less support needs, that like my needs don't really matter in comparison to someone who has more support needs. When we start doing that, what we're going to find is that there's always autistic or not, there's always going to be someone who has it worse than you, like with anything in life. But I think it might be good to kind of like acknowledge that perspective, but then also that leaves no room for you to tend to your own needs, to care for yourself, to support yourself, and to find ways that can help yourself. And so it's important to acknowledge the fact that like my challenges might not be the same challenges as someone else, but I still have these challenges, and I need to tend to these challenges, and I need to acknowledge and accept these challenges for what they are, because we can't like bypass those things either. And so it's a very nuanced conversation, and it's hard because I can definitely see like all sides of it, and I can understand like all viewpoints of it. But those are just my thoughts on it. And this has kind of been a long video. I feel like I'm just kind of ranting. But like I said from the very start with this YouTube channel, my intention is to just like create these authentic videos of like what goes on in my mind. And so this is what you're getting. So just to kind of wrap everything up and in conclusion here, I have lower support needs compared to other people on the autism spectrum. I might appear to be normal or high functioning on the outside, but there's a lot more to my experience than what meets the eye, than what can be observed externally, especially by people who don't know me. And it's important that we tend to these support needs and tend to these challenges, because we're deserving of it, and we all deserve to have our needs met, is what I'm trying to say. And so if you take anything from this video, just let it be like, be less quick to judge someone. This could be in regards to autism, or I guess like any sort of disability, but just like anything in life. Like, I think people are just so quick to judge without really understanding. And it's so important that we see the full picture and we seek to understand before making any sort of judgments, because most of the time the judgments that we're quick to make are always incorrect, and it leaves a misperception of that person or that thing in our mind, and it just perpetuates this cycle of otherness, of being separate from one another, when like we're all connected, we all deserve a place in this world, we all deserve love, and we all deserve understanding.